Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. It's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us today. Happy Friday, folks. Hope you all had a great week and looking forward to the weekend as much as I am. Well, the deportation rates continued today and last night and the day before that and every day since President Trump took office on January 20th. President Trump making it clear he's not playing any games with these criminal cartels. He's not playing any games with these criminal illegal aliens. They're in this country illegally. They committed crimes, and it's time to be deported. As I said in yesterday's episode, we are a nation of law, order, and borders. It doesn't get much simpler than that. President Trump's first administration, back in 2016 to 2020, he had floated the idea, or was reported at least, that he had floated the idea of maybe bombing some drug facilities that are producing fentanyl and cocaine and marijuana in Mexico. This is how the cartels make their money, and they peddle it through the border with nobody stopping them. At least that was the last 4 years. There's a new sheriff in town, in case you haven't figured it out, or the Marxist Dems haven't figured it out, and that's President Trump and his administration. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was on with Fox and Friends this morning and was asked about the prospect of blowing up these drug facilities if we can find them, if we know where they are. Maybe we already know where they are. Take a listen to Secretary of Defense Hegseth.
The drug cartels have been declared terrorist organizations. And if you find that, and we know if there's Al-Qaeda, we're going to hit them. I don't care if you're in Somalia, Sudan, or in Syria. If we find that they continue to fire at our border control and they continue to put fentanyl into our country, as the Secretary of Defense, are you permitted now to go after them in Mexico or wherever they are?
Brian, I don't want to get ahead of the president, and I won't. That's ultimately going to be his decision. But let me be clear, all options will be on the table. If we're dealing with what are designated to be foreign terrorist organizations who are specifically targeting Americans on our border, and we're finally securing our border. We've been securing other people's border for a very long time. The military is shifting toward an understanding of homeland defense on our sovereign territorial border. That is something we will do and do robustly.
Isn't that nice, folks? We have an administration that has the Americans' interest in its best interest. It's been 4 long years. We've all dealt with it. We all know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody who's dealt with a drug overdose. We've all witnessed it in our streets. If you live in a deep blue city, if you're fortunate enough to live in the streets of somewhere in Florida or one of these deep red states, you probably haven't had to deal with it as much as us who live in New York or in Chicago or in LA. But nonetheless, the Trump administration seems to be getting it all under control. They're just 11 days in. We've heard from Pete Hegseth multiple times. We've heard from other members of the cabinet and the administration who have been confirmed multiple times. We've heard from President Trump multiple times in just 11 days. Something tells me in the first 6 months of his administration, we're going to hear from President Trump more than we heard from Joe Biden in all 4 years. Not saying much, but President Trump is a workhorse who all he wants to do is make America great again. The Marxist Dems are doing all they can to stop him. Hakeem Jeffries today, in a press conference, said he's ready to fight President Trump and fight the administration and take it to the streets. Take a listen to Hakeem Jeffries.
We are going to fight it legislatively. We are going to fight it in the courts. And we're going to fight it in the streets.
What do you mean by that, Hakeem Jeffries? Are you threatening to cause some sort of insurrection in America? Do you not know what happened on January 6th when those patriotic American terrorists decided to cause an insurrection on our streets? Were you not around for that? I'd love to know what Hakeem Jeffries meant by that, by saying taking it to the streets. Maybe he'll clarify in the days ahead what he meant by that. But to me, it sounds like violence. He's inciting some sort of violence. But this could be why the Democratic Party, things like that, is in such a shambles. It's in the gutter. New polling from Quinnipiac, who, by the way, tends to be one of the more left-leaning pollsters, has the pro-child mutilation party upside down by 26 points. 57% unfavorable for the Marxist Dems to 31% favorable. They're continuing on with their same messaging they ran for in 2024. It's the same messaging that got them killed in this election, absolutely murdered. Gave control to the Senate to the Republicans, gave control to the House to the Republicans, and ultimately gave them the presidency back to Donald Trump, where he's rightfully sitting right now. I'm not sure what Hakeem Jeffries meant by that. I'm not sure what the Marxist Dems party is going to do going forward. They're set to elect a new DNC chair over this weekend. So we'll see the route they want to take and the violence that they want to choose. Tonight at midnight, tariffs go into effect on Canada and Mexico. These are the tariffs that President Trump promised to put on them if they didn't get their borders under control. And yes, Canada too. We have illegal immigration flowing through our northern border. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said it's going to start with 25% tariffs. They'll be placed on goods from both Mexico and Canada. Chinese imports will be 10% on duties. China, of course, the mass producer of fentanyl in this country. I think 10% is just a tiny bit too little for them. I would like to see upwards of 50% on them to really make it hit them where it hurts, because they've done far too much damage to this country. To get away with it, it would be a travesty for the American people. As I said, anyone who's known somebody who's died of a drug overdose, who gets to witness it walking on their streets, that's all from China with the help of Mexico. So hopefully those tariffs get to work and get these people under control and get stifle this drug import into America. Our guest today is Professor William Jacobson, folks. He's a Cornell University law professor, and he's also the founder of the Equal Protection Project. He joins us now. Professor Jacobson, it's great to have you with us here on the Great America Show. And as I told you before, you were one of Lou's favorite guests. He thought you were such a brilliant mind, so we couldn't think of a better guest to have on today to talk about all that's going on. I want to play for the audience a quick clip back from 2023. Ted Cruz is talking to the FAA administrator who was brought forward by the Biden administration. Let's play this for the audience, and then we'll discuss it.
Have you ever flown a plane?
Thank you for the question, Senator. No, I have never flown a plane.
So you weren't a military pilot or a commercial airline pilot?
No, Senator.
Have you ever worked for an airline?
No, Senator.
Have you ever worked as an air traffic controller?
No, Senator.
Have you ever worked for a company that manufactures airplanes?
No, Senator.
Have you ever worked for a company that fixes airplanes?
No, Senator.
FAA administrator is a specialized position. I'm not qualified to be FAA administrator. I have no idea how to fly a plane. No one in their right mind would put me in charge of aviation safety because I don't have that experience. I suspect most of the members of this committee are in a similar position. The American people, when they think about aviation safety, when they think about, I played in this committee, a Southwest Airlines and FedEx plane almost colliding at Austin's airport. They want an FAA administrator who knows why those planes crash and knows how to fix it to keep them safe. And with all respect, Mr. Washington, it gives no comfort to the flying public that their pilot might be a transgendered witch, but doesn't actually know how to prevent the plane from crashing into the ground and killing them. I believe your record is woefully lacking. And in fact, you have zero aviation safety experience.
Professor, this was back in 2023, of course, before the tragedy we saw that happen on Wednesday night. My background is in aviation. I know what it's like. I went to school to be a pilot. I am a pilot. I know what it's like to go through training, and I know what it's like for air traffic controllers to go through training. How did we find ourselves in this situation where we now have the deadliest plane crash in 15 years?
Well, I think we have to be very careful. The DEI, the quotas, things like that is an extremely serious issue, particularly when you get into technical areas like aviation safety. I mean, it is a threat. Whether it caused this accident will depend on what we find out more about who is in charge, who is not in charge, what went wrong. So the video clip you just played is actually kind of shocking and frightening. That, why was this person even nominated for that position? It's really hard to understand. I would not accept a nomination to be FAA administrator. I have no clue what I would be doing. And it does not appear that the person in that clip who's being questioned by Ted Cruz has any idea what to do either. It's just not the sort of thing you can learn on the fly. It's like, okay, I'm going to appoint you, general manager of this nuclear, energy plant. It's like, why would you do that? And I think that's the question we ask with a lot of these things. why are you even doing this? And I think that's, one of the questions Ted Cruz got to, like, why are we even here? So I don't want to jump to conclusions that caused this crash, but even if it didn't, it's a problem that we need to address.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. President Trump came out and mentioned it. He obviously had some sort of information as to, what was going on before the general public did. The thing I do find abhorrent about this whole situation is we're now going on 2 days, Professor. We still have bodies that are in the water. This is America. We have the greatest infrastructure in the world. We still have bodies that are floating in the water that they can't get out yet. We have the names of the 2 pilots released, but we don't have the name of the female who was apparently flying the plane at the time. This is a government that I expect to be transparent in all and everything. Back last year, as I mentioned, I went to an aeronautical school, and while I was in school, it was during the Obama times. And partway through my schooling, I had a lot of friends who were in school to be air traffic controllers. Obama got rid of the mandate that you had to go to college and you had to be a professional to become an air traffic controller. And I had friends who had just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on school. They now are told they don't need it, and you're going to be hired based on DEI. Well, lo and behold, just a few years later, the FAA's diversity hiring practices are under scrutiny for exactly that. Hiring, there's 1,000 people in this class action lawsuit, hiring based on color, hiring based on race, hiring based on gender. How did we get to this point in this country? A question I often ask on this show, and maybe you can answer this because you're a brilliant scholar mind. Why are we still asking on job applications what your ethnicity is and what your gender is, and whether you're gay, straight, heterosexual, bisexual? What does that have to do with anything?
Well, it doesn't. And there's a saying that, collapse comes gradually, then suddenly. Okay. And we've been gradually moving towards a collapse of our institutions, which have been completely captured by group identity politics. And you can call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can call it anti-racism. You can call it critical race theory. It's all of those things, but it's an identity politics. Who you are and whether you get hired depends on what group you are serving as a proxy for. So we no longer hire the individual because of the individual. We take into account what group are you part of. And so how did it get to this point? It got to the point over the course of a decade or more. How did it specifically get to this point? In 2021, Joe Biden issued an executive order, now rescinded by Donald Trump, which forced the federal government to engage in what it called racial equity throughout everything it does. So this was a man-made disaster. Okay, it didn't need to be this way. And he doubled down on it in 2023 with a second executive order, which is also now rescinded. So what's happened at the FAA didn't start with Biden, as you indicate. It goes back to the Obama years, but the acceleration of the collapse has taken place because the federal government, both in terms of hiring, contracting, grant making, almost every aspect of it has been captured by a group identity ideology, which again could be described in many different ways with many different acronyms, but it elevates identity over quality and merit. And the person who's hired may have quality and merit, but that's not why they're hired. Right. Okay, they're hired because of skin color or gender identity or something else. And so we're now seeing the sudden part of the collapse that has been coming.
Doesn't this, Professor, go against every fabric that Americans believe in right now, that this country was built on, that we're all the same inside, that it doesn't matter what color your skin is, we're all the same on the inside, we all live for the same thing, God, family, and country, at least that's what I like to think. Doesn't this go against every fabric in our body?
It certainly does. I mean, a lot of people say, well, we're a country that was founded when there was slavery. Okay, but that was, how long ago was that? Okay, right. At least since the mid 50s to mid 60s, the civil rights laws have been passed. The ideology of the country unabashedly is against discrimination, against racial discrimination. The 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause applies as well as the Fifth Amendment applies equal protection that's been read into it. So at least for 70 years or 60 to 70 years. The ethos of this country has not been to pick people based on the color of their skin, just the opposite. So, if you went back to the 1930s and 40s, maybe you could make an argument that that wasn't our ethos as a country, even despite the Constitution. But you can't make that anymore. It's been 60, 70 years. We shouldn't be doing this right now. We shouldn't be engaging in what amounts to racial retribution. And that's really what it is that's going on. They call it anti-racism. They call it a lot of different things, but it's holding some applicant for an air traffic controller job, not giving that person that job because of what somebody with a similar skin color did 80 years ago. How ridiculous is that? We need to move beyond this.
And you know what, Professor, that African American, that Hispanic American, that Asian American, whatever the ethnicity may be, it's a slight to them because they fought to where they get to where they are today, to the job that they want based on their grades. I can guarantee you 9.5 out of 10 of those folks who've gotten a job of a certain race are offended by this because it's not right. It should be based on your merit, and it probably sticks in the back of their head. Was I hired because I'm of different race? Am I hired to make a quota, or was I hired because I was actually the best candidate for this position? Going back to the job applications of asking, if you're male, female, your race, ethnicity, is there any legal remedy that this country can go through, federal government, state and local governments, to get that off of a job application, to get that off of a college application so that you don't even see a name?
Yeah, well, it depends. Some of that data is required to be collected for statistical purposes. And so the person doing the hiring really doesn't need to see that data, but it's data the government wants to collect for whatever its reasons. But, in the federal government now, that's banned. Those practices are banned since Donald Trump's executive orders. And remember, the federal government has a massive reach. It's not just who gets hired by them, it's who they contract with. And these racial mandates were imposed on private businesses that wanted to do business. So I think it's changing. I really do think that it's changing.
Your mouth to God's ears. I want to take a quick break here. When we return, President Trump, one of his executive orders went into effect at 5 p.m. today to remove all pronouns from employee signatures. Isn't that, it's like something so common, Professor. Trump's Department of Education also opening an investigation into schools' alleged discrimination of white students. Go figure. We're coming right back with Professor William Jacobson, the brilliant law mind, Cornell University. We're coming right back. Stay with us.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sale because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Folks, we're back with Professor William Jacobson of Cornell University. I want to turn to something. It seems so common to me of why it shouldn't have been in place in the first place. President Trump at 5 p.m. today, one of his executive orders went into effect for federal workers to remove the pronouns from their employee signatures. Okay. It's mind-blowing to me that this was there in the first place, that you had to have an employee signature. Now, I have family members who work for large corporations, and they were pretty much told by their managers in their LinkedIn profiles, you need to have your signature in there, otherwise it's frowned upon. Have we gotten so stupid as a society, Professor, that we need to tell people I'm he, him, I'm he, she, I'm she, her, I'm they, them? What does it come to?
Well, this is how, kind of leftist ideology gets to dominate. They force you to use their terminology. They force you to take little steps that you don't want to take, and then later more little steps, and then more little steps. So the whole pronoun thing is, one of those little steps. If they can get you to acknowledge the pronoun thing, that means you're acknowledging a larger gender ideology and you're accepting it. And maybe you want to, maybe you don't want to. But the use of those pronouns is a combination of forcing people to adopt ideologies they may not agree with, and also really virtue signaling in many ways. It's, I'm going to show everybody that I am holier than everybody else because I'm going to use pronouns. Okay.
Right. And if you don't describe them by their pronouns, you're in big trouble. In most corporations, the federal government. I just want to read some briefs from this executive order because President Trump is by no means a doctor. And the most surprising part to me, Professor, is that doctors who perform these surgeries, I always tell people on the show, and it may be offensive, and I don't care, there's no such thing as transgender. You cannot change your gender. Your biological makeup is what it was at birth. You can't change that. So I just want to read this executive order from President Trump. Quote, it's the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female. These sexes are not changeable and are grounded in fundamental and incontrovertible reality. Under my direction, the executive branch will enforce all sex protective laws to promote this reality. And the following definitions shall govern all executive interpretations of application of federal law and administration policy. I will just go through a few of them. Sex. Sex shall refer to an individual's biological classification as either male or female. Sex is not a synonym for and does not include the concept of gender identity. If you are a woman, if you are a male, males shall be described as a boy, shall also be an adult, juvenile, human males, respectively. Females means a person belonging to, at conception, to the sex that produces the large reproductive cells. Why did it take President Trump to come in, Professor, for something so common sense to be put into law? This shouldn't even be something that we should be wasting our time on as a government. We have so many problems with this country right now. You have a border that's out of control. You have China producing fentanyl, shipping into this country, wiping out people. You had the coronavirus. I mean, there are so many things that are wrong with this country right now. Yet President Trump is stuck here wasting time on stupidity.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the ideology that's taken hold, the forced use of pronouns, the use of pronouns in a signature, all those sort of things. And it got to crisis levels mostly because of what's happening with girls' sports. I mean, I'm so old, I remember when girls having their own sports opportunities was a feminist issue. Okay. Right. I mean, Title IX was a feminist issue. It's how girls advanced. Everybody recognized that. Well, one particular girl may be better than one particular boy. As a group, men are stronger, physically stronger. Men are physically faster. But this gender ideology has so twisted things that we've lost that distinction. So now you have biological males, or also called males, in girls' sports. And everybody says, well, it's only, 1 out of 1,000, but there are only 3 spots on the podium. Okay. You don't need 1,000 people. And we've seen many examples in Connecticut and elsewhere of, boys competing in girls' sports and taking one of those 3 spots at the top. That means you don't get a scholarship. That means you don't get money for college. And then you have the whole issue of women's prisons really horrible stories, horrible, gut-wrenching stories of women being put in prisons with men who identify as women. And nobody's willing to stand up to it and say, wait a second, what about the safety of women? What about the women's private spaces was a feminist issue? How is it that men are in women's locker rooms? These are all serious issues. And it's unfortunate it took, at least for the federal government, for Donald Trump to have to issue an executive order that 10 years ago, people would have laughed about this situation. But it's a very situation. Women are entitled to their own rights. We've recognized that for a long time. They're entitled to their spaces. And let's face it, this is really about women, protecting women. The men don't really care, about this so much. But a woman should not have to wonder who's in her locker room or who's in her bathroom, and so it's common sense what he did. It makes logical sense, but we never should have gotten to this point because people went too far.
Right. And if you look to the adverse, as you and I both agree on this, you're a sexist and you're a misogynist and you're canceled because you're insensitive to these people who decided they wanted to try to change their gender. You can't, as I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a common sense kind of guy, as most smart people are. And it's just crazy that it's gone this far, that once again, the federal government had to step in to stop. But it didn't stop there, Professor. It went further than that. You have kids now in classrooms in New Jersey who think that they're dogs. They're called furries. You send your kid to school and they're pretending to be animals. This falls on the parents and the way that they're raising the kids. I don't think that the kids are being raised the way they were when you were a child. Even when I was a child growing up in the late 90s or early 2000s, we learned respect. We learned, that you respect elders, you respect your women, and you lived your life like a gentleman or like a woman. But now you've got all types of crazies. Kids wanting to be furries, men wanting to play in women's sports. And it's gotten so bad that we've had to take it up now to the Supreme Court, to high courts. Why can't these schools just say, listen, this is it. You're a man, you're playing in a man's sport. You're a woman, you're playing in a women's sport. And why can't these schools just say, you are what you are when you were born on your birth certificate?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've heard the story about the furries. I don't know if that's true or not.
It's true.
But it wouldn't be shocking if it was true. True. Okay. But that's not the problem. The problem is not children growing up to think they're animals. It's children being told from the moment they enter the school system that they don't really know what they are. They're not a boy or a girl. They're whatever they want to be. And it's age inappropriate, and that's really what went on in Florida with the, falsely labeled say gay law, which had nothing to do with saying gay. Okay. That's how they frame things. It simply restricted what sort of sexual material could be provided to children through the third grade, okay, kindergarteners. And, there's something very troubling about what seems to be an organized, effort to cast doubt in young children's minds, okay? And it's very sickening in many ways, that sort of proselytizing process that seems to be going on. Leave the kindergartner alone, please, okay? And what about the parents' rights? Right. Why can't the parents? There's litigation ongoing now about whether parents can opt their kids out of certain things. And what is it? It's a left-wing totalitarian attitude that they must control everything, including your kids. It's very Soviet-like. I studied in the Soviet Union during part of college. Right. That the kids belong to the state. They don't belong to the parents. And that's where we're heading in this country. And it's very dangerous. The attempt to, extricate parents from school systems, the attempt by the Justice Department to prosecute, moms and dads who maybe spoke a little too loud at the school board meeting. Okay. This is all a process of, taking parents out of the equation. And so how did we get to this point? We got to this point the same way we got to everything else. The institutions have been captured by the ideologues and who are advancing theories that just 10 years ago would have gotten them laughed out of the room. And now if you don't agree with it, you get fired.
Right. The thing that's so perplexing to me is, used to be back in the day, every kid got a beating from their parents. You did something wrong, you got a smack, you got a, whatever. Now you do that, you go to jail. All right. If you do that, you're going to jail. But you could mutilate your child, 5 years old, 4 years old, whatever you want. I see these videos on Instagram all the time, a parent dressing their son up as a girl singing Taylor Swift. That's completely fine. You could send your kid to the, transgender surgeries. You're fine. But if you smack your kid on the rear end for doing something wrong to teach him a lesson, you're going to jail. We've gotten so ass backwards in this country. I really just don't know how we could ever revert and come back to reality. Are you confident we can?
I don't know. My attitude is two things are not mutually exclusive. Whether you're in favor of corporal punishment or not, I would come out. You don't have to hit your kid, but you also don't have to put them through transgender surgery. Okay. How about we do neither? Okay. Right. And I think that's a problem. I mean, it's really, these surgeries are horrendous. They're grotesque. They're offensive. we're already starting the process, but we're going to look back upon these 3 to 4 years and wonder how we let this happen to children. Remember, it's grotesque enough when it happens when you're an adult, but at least adults get to choose things.
Right.
But, 11, 12, 14, 15-year-olds, there's a reason we don't let them drive and we don't let them vote, okay? Because they don't have the mental maturity, and I mean that in the brain process way, to make those sort of life-altering decisions. And the medical industry has been captured. The medical associations have been captured. It's really horrible. The stuff that's gone on in the medical industry is, I keep using the word grotesque, but that's what it is when you read about these surgeries. Who thought this up? I mean, how could you possibly do that? It used to be very exceptional cases. In Sweden, you could get those surgeries and so on, but truly exceptional cases. Now you have entire hospitals putting out videos about their gender-affirming care, which is just a euphemism for life-altering changes to a child, either pharmaceutically or surgically. And it shouldn't have been allowed. It shouldn't be allowed. I mean, just because you've got an MD doesn't allow you to do anything you want to a child. And I hope there are prosecutions down the road.
There was a doctor, I think he was in Dallas, Texas, maybe last year or so, who spoke out against these gender-affirming surgeries, and the DOJ, of course, came after him. Now, I hope President Trump and his administration looks into that and rights the wrong, but how can you be a doctor? I mean, doctors and lawyers are among, depending on the lawyer, your select few, are some of the smartest minds in this country, right? They're the people who make the laws, or the people who built this country and determine what's right, what's wrong. And doctors are the ones who save lives. It's troubling for me, Professor, to see a doctor, a man who went through years of medical school, a man who knows human anatomy, to sit there and think it's okay, to sit there and perform a surgery, as you said, that's irreversible. 5-year-old, 6-year-old kids, once you go gender mutilation, there's no going back. I mean, that's it. And you look at the stories now of kids who are coming out 10 years later, 5 years later, saying, I ruined my life. There's no going back. I lost the 5 years of my life. I mutilated myself. I removed my breasts to do this. And it's over. I mean, your life is ruined. You look at Elon Musk, smartest man in the world. He lost his child to the same thing. And it's not a socio issue where the poor people do it, the rich people do it. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, the smartest man in the world, and he lost his child.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a social contagion in many ways. It's become the cool thing to do. Right. There have been other social contagions. I think it's very interesting that it is most dominant among teenage girls, just like there was a time period when anorexia was most prominent among teenage girls. And the internet has made things infinitely worse. As to that doctor that you're talking about in Texas, I do believe they dismissed the prosecution of him. What he was accused of doing is blowing the whistle, essentially, on a Texas hospital, which was violating state policy in his mind. And he was prosecuted by the U.S. Department of Justice for allegedly violating the privacy rights of the patients that he blew the whistle on, or, their medical cases. And that has been, to my understanding, that case has been dismissed and he's been vindicated, because what it was the medical establishment violating, he said, state law on not performing these surgeries and these chemical interventions. And so he blew the whistle, and the Department of Justice, under the prior administration, tried to find a way to prosecute him. That's how crazy it got. They should have given him an award. He should get the presidential, whatever that medal is that you give to civilians, for trying to protect children.
Yeah. Did you ever think in your years, I mean, you're a little bit older than me, not much older, 33, 34 years old or something, right? Did you ever think?
I just turned 30.
Did you ever think, I mean, through your years, you've seen a lot of stuff going on in this country. Did you ever think we'd be at these crossroads where we're seeing things like we just discussed, with whether it be the DEI, whether it be these gender reaffirming surgeries of children, even adults? Did you ever think, I mean, your mind must be exploding inside.
I never really did. With the benefit of hindsight, I could see it developing. I can track the history of it. I say now it all makes sense. But when you're going through it, you don't realize it. And it was a capture. The institutions we should most rely on, medical establishment, legal establishment, not to mention education establishment, have all been captured by far left-wing ideology. Doesn't mean every single person in those organizations is that way, but they've been ideologically captured. And people say, well, what can we do? An executive order is a good first step, but we really have a cultural battle here to regain control of our society. And I think the place it needs to start is in education, because that's where the damage is going. All the crazy ideas we're now talking about developed on the campuses. They didn't develop in the hospital. They didn't develop in the corporation. They developed on the campuses. And I forget who it was, but somebody had the phrase, I think it was Andrew Sullivan, that, we're all a campus now, or we're all the campus now. Our whole society has gone into crazy land with these theoretical ideas that developed on campuses and now have captured everything. So it's not a great situation. I think that I can look back on it and understand what went on. And there were points in time where I understood it, and both I and other people spoke out about it. But it really, hopefully this new presidency is a chance to reverse the flow of what society has been happening, not to get us back to some, 1950s, leave it to Beaver, family thing, but let's get us back to rationality. Let's get us not back to the center, back away from the complete craziness. If Donald Trump can accomplish that in 4 years, maybe with 8 years added on for J.D. Vance, he will have in many ways saved the country from self-destruction.
It's the crazy thing is it's not just K through 12 anymore. And we're going to talk about this on the other side of this break, but I just want to get this point in. It's not just K through 12. It's these colleges and universities. You belong to one of them as a law professor. Probably one of the best institutions in this country. If you went to Cornell, if you go to Cornell, you think it's number one. If you went to Harvard, it's number two, or so on and so forth. But it's these colleges and institutions that are brainwashing facilities. I have a sister who went to Colgate University up in Hamilton, New York. When she went, it was a top, I think, 15 school in the country. She left here, Republican, whatever, based on our parents. We were born Republicans, and came back this Marxist. I love her to death, but she came back this Marxist liberal who sees the world a completely different way. And it's crazy. I have another sister who went to school down in SMU in Texas. Came back the same way she left. There was no indoctrination there. It was a good experience, but it's these universities that are doing it, and they're indoctrinating and they're brainwashing kids. And it's hard to believe. And we're going to take this up on the other side of this quick break with William Jacobson, professor at Cornell Law, how such smart kids who are in Ivy League schools, who are in these top universities, can be so easily manipulated by these Marxist professors. We're coming right back with William Jacobson. Folks, stay with us.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed, because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Folks, we're back with Professor William Jacobson. He's a professor at Cornell Law, and he's also the founder of the Equal Protection Project. He's got a big lawsuit we're going to talk about in just a moment. But I want to start with this. How is it possible that such smart kids who scored through the roof on their SATs, go to these Ivy League schools, they leave their home level-headed, seeing the country as a great place, and then they come home after 4 years or their first Christmas break, and they're radicalized Marxist? How is it possible?
Well, there are enormous social pressures on college campuses to conform and the price of speaking out and not conforming is so high in terms of being socially ostracized or worse, that people just go along with it. And it is truly astounding. In many cases, it may only take a semester for somebody to be turned around. And we've got to look at that, and we've got to understand why and how that's happening. But I believe it's a combination of the orientation and other ideology the colleges are pushing and the severe social pressure to conform. And orientation programs, you walk in and your first 2 weeks is all of the things we've been talking about here, okay? Basically, we just did the orientation program from the other side that a college student would get. And, and it's not an exaggeration that they are taught to believe that the United States is inherently evil. It's inherently racist. It can't be changed. It's the main problem in the world. Capitalism is the main problem in the world. Really, it's, and that's orientation. Okay. And then you have the social pressure. The internet is one of the worst things that ever happened in this world. Yeah. Certainly the social media part of the internet is one of the worst things. There's mobbing on the internet. There's bad mouthing. Thankfully, when I grew up and went to college, I'm really thrilled there was no internet. Whatever the social pressures were, you dealt with them in the cafeteria at high school. You didn't deal with them all night long, all morning long, all day long on the internet. So it's really, I think we need to look at this. We need to look at the rising rates of depression among students, particularly bad among females. And we need to look at the dropout effect for young men. They are essentially dropping out of society in many ways and choosing not to go to these colleges. I can't blame them because on day one of orientation, they're accused of being, potential rapists. So it's a bad situation. People are voting with their feet. Young men are voting with their feet. And I can't blame a lot of them, and so, but so many of the problems in our country stem from higher education. All this stuff that's going on in elementary school didn't start in elementary school. Right. It started on the college campuses with the students who went into teaching, with the students who went into the foundations that provide money, with the students who went into the publishing houses that published the books. It didn't start in K through 12. It started in college, but it's now worked its way down into K through 12. We have a major crisis in this country in higher education, and we nobody seems willing to address it. At least Trump is trying to address it. He's 2 weeks in, not even 2 weeks. It's got 4 more years. I hope he keeps up the pace. Not all of these things will land. Not all of these things will be successful, but some of them will be, and I'm all in favor of that.
I think you're absolutely right. And there's a saying, the fish rots from the head down. And that's exactly what we're seeing now with you saying, starting with the colleges now. You mentioned the whole capitalism thing. That was sort of the woke ideology before this whole everyone's racist. You probably remember the whole Occupy Wall Street thing, where a bunch of these idiot kids sat out on Wall Street occupying it wanting to get rid of banks, not realizing that everything they've bought, every piece of clothing they're wearing, everything their parents done for them was bought through a bank. That was sort of the first thing. And I took special interest in that because my father was in banking on Wall Street and my sisters are in Wall Street banking. And I'm sitting there and I'm young at the time and I'm thinking, I'm 15, 16 years old. How dumb are these people that they want to get rid of banks? What do you do with your money? That was one thing. But you're right. Technology and social media, these things are the devil. They really are. Kids will never see the days of going and knocking on your friend's door to tell them to come out to play, staying out on the street, playing, riding bikes until your mom yelled at you to come home. Those days are long gone. And it's sad. I think my generation was probably one of the last ones who got to witness that, where you weren't sitting home playing video games all day. You weren't sitting on TikTok. You mentioned depression rates among women. Everyone follows each other on Instagram, on TikTok. You see your friends are out. You're not invited. Send you into depression. You look at the uprise in school shootings. I think that social media probably has a massive effect on what goes through these kids' minds. They see that they're not included in plans. One of the kids gets beat up on the playground. Someone's got a video of it. Next thing you know, it's all online and everyone's making fun of you the next day. It really, social media and these cell phones have been the demise of, I think, society for the last 10 years coming. It's really sad. The last thing I want to hit on is the other thing is birth rates. You look at the birth rate decline in this country. People don't want to have kids anymore. Women don't want to get impregnated. Young men don't want to impregnate women. Birth rates are through the floor, and we're literally a dying species. We're a dying society. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's essentially like a trailing indicator, if that's the right word, that the fact that people don't want to raise families, they don't want to get married, they don't want to invest in a future generation, is a reflection of all the other things that have gone wrong in our culture. It's not unique to the United States. There are other developed nations where it's worse. I mean, Korea is collapsing birth rate wise much worse than we are, South Korea, same throughout Western Europe. Yep. Very interestingly, the only economically developed country in the world where the birth rate far exceeds the replacement rate is Israel. And Israel has, actually looked at this the other day for a different reason. Israel, I think, has a 3.3 child per woman rate, and it's roughly equal between, Arabs and Jews. So it's not one or the other. They're roughly equal rates. The Arab rate has come down dramatically with economic development to now where Arabs and Jews are basically the same, but it's over 3. Even for secular Jews, it's 2.2, which is basically the replacement rate. Right. For religious Jews, it's much higher. But there's something about that society, despite all their problems, despite constantly being at war, despite terrorism, all these things, they're also ranked the 4th happiest country in the world. And I think the happiness that they have is reflected in the birth rate. That's not true everywhere. Sometimes it's a reflection of poverty, lack of access to contraception, things like that. But in the developed world, the 4th happiest country also happens to have the highest birth rate. And so I think the things you're pointing about, the collapse of our birth rate in the United States, is a reflection of, I believe, in part, the growing unhappiness in this country.
Yeah, and you know what? And that's Israel, where you're mandated as a man to go into the military. That's a whole different thing. We can't draft people into the military here. But I constantly ask myself, I have no kids, I'm not married. Why would I want to do that to myself? As for the kids aspect, why do I want to bring a kid into the world where I'm considered a domestic terrorist if I go against what they're being taught in school? Why do I want to bring a kid into the world where it's not even affordable to live in New York if you're not making $150,000 or more? Why do I want to bring a kid into the world who's going to be indoctrinated once he or she goes to college to a belief? Why do I want to bring a kid into the world that's going to grow up one day to hate me because I teach them right from wrong? It's a very, very, very big problem. We could spend hours talking about it. Before we get to your lawsuit, I want to talk about President Trump looking to cancel the visas of the pro-Palestine protesters. We'd spoken to you a lot. You were on Lute's show a bunch back when we had the Palestinian protests at NYU and at Harvard and Cornell. Your thoughts, as this is one of President Trump's first acts in the first, as we say, 11 days in office, to go after these terrorist sympathizers who were terrorizing kids, were terrorizing universities, shutting down universities like they own the place.
Well, I think you got to look at what the terms of their visas are. Let's remember, these are people who are here on permission. And the terms of their, as I understand the argument, is that this conduct by them, flying the Hezbollah flag, flying the Hamas flag, which may be lawful for an American to do it, may be lawful for them to do it. They don't go to jail for it. But it might violate the terms of their visa that brought them here, allowed them to come here. And I think the terms of visas is legitimate and should be enforced. And so I think that might be a positive thing. I think if you look at a lot of these protests, there seem to be a very disproportionate number of foreigners who are here on visas, taunting people on the streets and engaging in aggressive conduct that may not be criminal in the United States, but may violate the terms of their visa. And I think we should toughen up those visas. You don't have a right to come to this country. And if you're going to come here, you have to abide by the terms that we allowed you in. And I don't know if that conduct violates the visas or not. The president seems to think it does. That will be litigated, of course. Everything's litigated. But, I'm not very sympathetic to the people who come here on a visa, and the visa says you can't engage in support of terrorist groups or whatever, and then comes here and, taunts students, not just Jewish, but taunts American students with a Hamas flag or with an ISIS flag.
Right.
You're not deserving to be in this country if that's what you're doing. Now, if you just have an opinion we don't like, that's a different thing. But I think take it as it comes. And as of now, my understanding is the threat of deporting people is not because you don't like their opinion, but because they're engaging in conduct which violates the terms of their visas.
And this, you didn't even mention the guys and women who are burning American flags. Nobody's telling you have to be in this country. That's the great thing about it. If you're an American citizen, you can leave freely. If you're not an American citizen, you're free to go back where you came from if you hate this country and you hate the people that are here and the fabrics that we stand for. It doesn't get much simpler than that. We all dealt with Joe Biden for 4 years, gruelingly, with all the bad things he did in this country, and we took it. None of us said we're leaving the country if he wins. I think it's probably because they're a little bit more level-headed than some of these Marxists, but it's truly sickening that this is what it's come to. Real quick, before we get to your lawsuit, I keep saying we're getting to it, but I want to ask you about his President Trump's deportations and get a legal scholar's mind on it. I had said, and I believed before he took office, that somewhere, somehow, it's going to get caught up in the courts. Someone's going to come and block it. There's nothing in the Constitution about birthright citizenship. What's your take on the deportations? Are we going to be allowed to continue to do them? And President Trump wanted to get rid of birthright citizenship. What do you think the implications are for that?
Yeah, well, on the deportations, I think that it would not shock me if some district court judges put a halt to things. Right. But there are 2 to 3 million people in this country illegally, right, who have gone through the immigration judicial system. They have been ordered to leave. Their asylum claims were denied, and they're still here. They have no basis for interfering with that, a federal judge. Same with people who are here illegally and commit crimes. It would be nice if Congress would do its job, but there are already enough laws on the books to deport them. And the law that I think it was signed today or yesterday about the young woman in Georgia who was killed by Laken Riley will. That's legislation which should allow a lot of these people. Remember, the outrageous thing about Democrats voting against that is we're talking about people who are here illegally and who committed violent crimes while here. And they want them to stay?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So I think there will be a deportation. There will be a lot of what's called self-deportation once the job opportunities dry up, once this is no longer their free meal ticket. I think you'll find a lot of people leaving. I would not be surprised. It's not going to address everything. On the issue of birthright citizenship, a lot of people are treating that as a frivolous issue. Oh, the Supreme Court's already recognized birthright citizenship. Not really. It's not as clear as people think. The decision that people keep referring to had to do with the children born to permanent resident aliens here, right, people who had permission to stay permanently in the country, not somebody who just landed on a plane from Asia on birthright tourism, right, not somebody who crossed the border illegally and gave birth. There's never, to my knowledge, been a Supreme Court ruling on whether the child of somebody in the country illegally is entitled to birthright citizenship. And there is significant evidence that the framers of the 14th Amendment did not intend that when they framed the issue of that's now called birthright citizenship. So I don't think it's a frivolous issue. I can't predict how the court will come down, but it is not a frivolous issue like all of the media is treating it, all of the legacy media is treating it like this is crazy, this is, frivolous. A judge made a comment apparently in one of the cases, like, I can't believe any lawyer would come in here and argue. Well, there's a lot of scholarly articles that argue that, one, our notion of birthright citizenship is not supported by the Constitution and the framers of the 14th Amendment, and also that the case law really isn't as strong for it as people are claiming.
Right. I think that makes perfect sense. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. But I wanted to get your take on that because, like I said, I think you're a brilliant legal scholar. It's so funny to me how two people so far right, so far left can be so far disconnected on the same issue. You know, there are some brilliant legal minds on the left, not many, but it's just so funny to me. I want to turn to a lawsuit that you had filed last August that's finally now picking up some traction against the Ithaca School District and their discrimination against white students. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with the case and how it's going to progress.
So I teach at Cornell, which is in Ithaca, okay? Right. And it came to my attention, I don't even remember how, somebody must have tipped me off or something, that they had been running a program called Students of Color United annual gathering, and that white students were excluded from it. And I looked into it and I researched it, and sure enough, this was a horrible program running over 4 years in the Ithaca City School District, to which white students were barred. To the extent, I mean, I'm not even talking about nuance here. They had a frequently asked question on the official website explaining, why aren't white students invited? Okay. The registration form required students registering for this event to affirm that they understand this is only for students of color. Okay. The administrative emails that we gathered through various processes, mostly Freedom of Information law process in New York, it was very clear. Every level administrator, and what's outrageous about it is that people did complain. Okay. After the first year of this event in 2021, I think it was, people complained. Formally, it came up at the Board of Education, and the Board of Education ignored the complaints. People in the community, and this is a liberal community, are saying, this doesn't seem right to me, okay? Why are we segregating students by race? The students who were, the non-white students were released from class on the days of this event, and the white students had to stand behind, in class, or stay behind in class. And so really grotesque stuff. And so we sent a demand letter to the district and went public with it and got it written up, a lot of publicity. And the district said, we're not really doing that. That was just a miscommunication. And I didn't like that, okay, because it wasn't a miscommunication. We have 4 years of your records, okay? And so we then followed up in August. So that would have been late May, early June of last year, after they've been doing it for 4 years. And we filed a civil rights complaint with the Office for Civil Rights of the U.S. Department of Education. And in it, we asked the Department of Education to open an investigation and take action against the district for this grotesque 4-year discriminatory program that they had. And just now, with this incoming Trump administration, they opened a formal investigation. And that's the first big step in any civil rights complaint with the department, is when they make the decision to open the investigation. That doesn't mean they found the district guilty, but it means they think there's enough there to open it. So that's what we have. They've now moved into higher gear, let's put it that way. And we think the district needs to be held accountable, because dozens of teachers were involved in this. Dozens of administrators up to the highest level. The Board of Education was involved in this. And they were non-apologetic. They've never apologized for it. They've denied and obfuscated what they did. They wrote it off in a press release, a public statement. This was a miscommunication. We apologize for any misunderstanding from our communications. We will try to be better in the future. No, this was outright discrimination on the basis of race against white students who could not attend this event. And we want them to be held accountable. And I hope the Department of Education does. We're calling for many things. I think they need a fine. I think they need to not have perhaps a an administrative monitor, a so-called special master appointed. This is a district that's in very deep denial about what they did. They still haven't apologized for it. I mean, that tells you right there. And that's what we want. And hopefully under this new administration, I'm not that critical of the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. They've opened other investigations for us. But I really hope the new administration takes it to a new level and a new level of enforcement. And these schools need to understand. We filed over 60 cases so far.
Wow.
These schools need to understand the civil rights laws protect everybody.
Right.
They don't only protect one race. And racism against whites, against Asians is not okay, just like racism against blacks and Hispanics is not okay. There's got to be equal enforcement of the laws. And that's what our Equal Protection Project, equalprotect.org, is all about, which is holding schools accountable to not just the civil rights laws, not just the 14th Amendment, but their own rules and regulations. All of these districts and all of these universities, the 60 we filed against, all have in their internal rules that they will not discriminate on the basis of race or national origin. And then they go out and they do it anyway. So I think Ithaca School District needs to be made an example of.
I'll go one further. I'm all for getting rid of the Department of Education altogether. It's far too much corruption there. There's far too many bureaucrats who skate by. You probably know a little something about tenure. They've probably got something over there that, makes them non-fireable, and they just sit there their whole lives. They get a pension, and they mean to do harm. We need more attorneys like you in this country, and I understand fully why you are one of Lou's favorite attorneys to have on the show. A brilliant mind. Folks, if you want to support Professor Jacobson and his project, it's the Equal Protection Project. You can go to equalprotect.org. You can donate. You can read all about all the work that they're doing for this great country and stopping this whole nonsense, this critical race era that we're in that hopefully is ending soon. Professor William Jacobson, I appreciate you joining us today. Come back soon.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us today. Please be sure to join us back here tomorrow for the Great America Show, where our quest for truth, justice, and the American way continues. Folks, we'll see you right back here tomorrow. Same time, same place. Until then, may God bless you. May God bless America, and may God bless the great Lou Dobbs. We'll see you tomorrow.